Hello there friends, and welcome back for another video here on my YouTube channel. This is Cassie. Today we're going to be making a light up card using some Trinity Stamps products along with a one light. This stamp set is called the Wheelie Cool stamp set. It has matching dies not only for the images but also all the words. This is the one light by Pearblossom Press. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. Our stencil is the checkered background stencil. We also have the Slimline tags, and then we also have some embellishments. So I'm going to show you, I used the second largest tag. I cut out 2 from watercolor paper. We only need 1 for now. And I've brought in that checkered background stencil. I'm going to put that onto my tonic platform. We're going to just tack that down with a little bit of mint tape, and then I'm going to tack the stencil down using a couple of the magnets that I have on my board. Then I'm going to bring in some distress ink in the color Black Soot along with a blending buddy. And we are going to just blend that color all through those squares. It's not going to look like much when I pull the stencil away to begin with. And I do apologize that as I'm blending, my camera's kind of going a little crazy. So it won't look like a whole lot when I pull this away. But the cool thing about this stencil is that, as you move it, you can make it look like a checker. I do need to bring it over just a little bit more because there's a little bit more of the tag showing, so we need to blend that on there. Then I'll pull those magnets away, and then we'll move the stencil so that we can get the checkered look. I'm just moving around to see where I want it. Then I'll tack that down once again using those magnets, and then bring in the Black Soot one more time. I do need to bring in a little bit more of that mint tape just to mask off that end so I don't get any ink over there. But we're going to keep blending. And then we'll move the stencil over to cover that area. And you can already see the checkered look. So imagine the colors you could do with this. You can have a lot of fun. All right, so we're going to clean up our mess, and then let me show you how cool that background is. I love that checkered look. So fun. All right, so I've decided I want to distress this a little bit, so I'm just going to use a little bit of water and kind of spritz that on that background. Let that sit for a few seconds. Then I will blot that up using one of my microfiber towels, and then I'm going to heat set it with my heat tool so that we can move on to the next step. Our next step will be stamping. So I've got my Wheelie Cool images in my mini Misty, and I'm going to stamp that down onto some watercolor paper. I decided I wanted to do a little bit of watercoloring with my distress inks. So I'm only bringing in 2 other colors, and I've got my Waffle Flower Media Mat. I'm going to put down some Mermaid Lagoon right onto the mat. The mat's really nice because it works really well with watercolors. You can just put your watercolors right on there. There's also wells on the right-hand side, so you can put that ink in there if you'd like, or just put it right where it is. And the mat it's a little bit grippy because I don't know exactly what material it's made out of, but when you're painting, your images won't go flying all over the place because it kind of grips to it. Now, looking at this image, I kind of wish that I had heat embossed it. So what that means is I wish I had used a pigment ink. I did use a watercolor ink. I used some Blackout ink, but I wish that I had used a pigment ink and then covered that with some clear embossing powder, because when you use clear embossing powder, it sort of creates little wells. And then as you watercolor, you don't have to worry about that water seeping into the other areas. But I did have a little bit of the seeping with the blue into the tires, and it ends up kind of affecting it a little bit, but to be honest with you, the more layers I added, since we're using watercolor, the more layers I added, the less it bothered me. But as you can see here, I put that color down and it really enhanced where that blue was, where it seeped through. But we're going to dry this, and then we'll move on to a second layer using that same color. We're using just a water brush, and here I'm going to add some shadowing and shading. And the more layers that you add, the more depth you can get. So I'm just putting a little bit down, and then I'm going to sort of soften those edges just a little bit. Let that dry just a tiny bit, and then I'll soften those edges so that they're not so hard. And I like that. I think we're getting somewhere. Now we can do the same thing with our orange That was the spiced marmalade. And I'm trying to soften out those edges on his helmet. And then we'll do the same thing with the black soot, bringing that into the tires. And then I'm going to add even one more layer to all these. So I kind of put down that color, blend it out just a tiny bit, and then I let that dry, and then I'll add even a third layer. That's one of the things I just love about watercolor is you can add so many different layers, even with one color. Now, if you wanted to really change up the depth of that, you could probably bring in a darker blue, but I like where we're going with this, and it was simple. 3 colors to watercolor these images. And we're just blending that out just a tiny bit. And then once again, with our black soot on those tires. But it's a fun process. The amount of depth I was able to get with just 3 colors. Once I'm done watercoloring, I am going to need to make sure that that is fairly dry, but check it out. So once that's dry, I can bring in the matching dyes that go along with this, tack that down with some more of that mint tape, and run that through my die cutting machine for those images. Then we'll be ready to move on to actually assembly. So I used that tag that I used previously and cut out some black, because if you don't notice, those tags have an embossed edge. One of the things I love about those Trinity Stamps dies. They have a whole line of embossed edge dies. And so I just wanted to bring that in. And so I did it with some orange as well. I'm going to stamp the happy birthday from our Wheelie Cool stamp. We're going to do first generation, then second generation, then third generation, which means it just gets lighter as we go. And then I'll tack that down with our Crafty Gluefriend. So we've got a nice little scene being built. And then I'm going to decide where I want my car, and I'll bring in the die for the smoke. And I'm going to tack that down with some of that mint tape, and we'll run this through our die cutting machine. This is where the light's going to come in. So I've got that hole there. We don't need that little piece of smoke, but I do have a piece of vellum, and I'm going to ink up our smoke on some of that vellum using a pigment ink, and then I am going to cover that with some clear embossing powder. The reason for that is vellum will not absorb that color. So whatever you use, it'll take either way too long to dry or it never will. So I use the embossing powder, and then I'm just going to heat set that till that is smooth and melted, which won't take any time at all since it's on vellum. Now I did discover that with that vellum, it is very see-through. This is a fairly light vellum. I used that Crafty Gluefriend to just glue that behind. And then this is where I'm going to bring in the one light. So you'll see these are so great. This package in particular comes with 5 lights and 5 batteries. I'll just pop out one of those batteries and pop out one of the mechanisms. Put our battery in there, just lining up the plus sign, and that's as easy as it gets. So you can see, as I hold that back there, you can see the light, the mechanism itself as well showing through. So I've decided to cut down 3 more pieces of vellum, and then you can't see it. You can still see the light when we press it, but you can't see the mechanism itself. So I'll just keep gluing those down. We'll layer that up really nicely. If you had a thicker vellum, that would work great, but this works as well. And no one's going to see it. It's in the back. So we've got 4 layers there. And then this is where I'm going to need to bring in that other tag that I die cut out of that watercolor paper. And then I can line up where exactly my mechanism is going to go behind there. So I'm just setting that on there. And that's going to be perfect. So I'm going to use some double-sided adhesive to put that on the back of our mechanism. And then I will peel off that release paper and we'll just stick that down into that corner of our tag. Now keep in mind what I'm doing today could be done on a card as well. And just about any card I make, you could turn into a tag, just, kind of changing it up a little bit. But tags are fun because you can attach those to bags. And people tend to save those. I mean, not that they're not saving your cards as well, but I don't know. I love tags. They're fun. All right, so I'm using some liquid glue, that Crafty Gluefriend, to attach down our little race car. I thought about popping it up with some foam tape, but in the end decided that I already I'm going to have enough dimension. But those hearts are the rose red hearts Those are new. I'm going to add several of them. They're all the same size, but I'm going to add several of those around. I just thought it would be kind of fun to have those pops of red. I end up picking up about 5 of them. So rule of odds, I suppose. And I'm just using my pickup stick along with my Crafty Gluefriend to attach those down. All right, and then this is where I'm going to need some foam tape. Now, the mechanisms themselves are a little bit thicker, so you would need to, if you had a regular foam tape, probably double it up. But this foam tape that I have is already a pretty good thickness. It's 3 millimeters deep. So I'm just going to put that down, and then we'll attach our tag. And our tag is almost ready. So you'll see I have all those arrows. Those arrows come from our Papercrafting Magic die set. And that coordinates with our Papercrafting Magic stamp set. So I'm going to put down one of those. We'll save the rest of those for another day. And then I'm going to bring in the push sentiment from our Papercrafting Magic, ink that up with some Shark Tooth by Ink on 3, and stamp that down. Now that that is all done and dry, I'm going to bring in some orange cord that I had in my stash, and we'll just make like a little tie to it. I'm going to tie a bow around the bottom of it so this doesn't go anywhere. And then I'll be able to eventually tie this to a bag if I'd like to. Or I could probably attach this to the front of a card. You know, however you want to do it. That's the fun thing about tags, is you can keep them as a tag, or you can attach them to a card or something else later on down the road. But I love how this turned out. So check that out. Is that not super fun? You could make a matching card to go with it if you wanted. All right, so if you like this video, be sure to hit that like button. Definitely consider subscribing if you haven't already done so. And as always, I will see you very soon in another video. Bye, everybody.